Hey guys, what did you think about chapter 1 of our new book? I I love it. And every time I read it, I forget how funny it is. It's just so different than anything else that we've read, and it's just unexpected. Like, totally wouldn't have expected Mrs. Jules to push a brand new computer out the window. But again, in the first book, we learned that nothing is normal at Wayside. So let's read chapter 2 and see if there's anything else kind of unpredictable. Chapter 2, Mark Miller. All right, so this is Mark Miller. All right, we haven't heard about him yet, so let's find out. Mrs. Jules rang her cowbell. I would like for you to meet Mark Miller, she said. He and his family just moved here all the way from Macedonia. Everyone stared at the new kid. He stood in the front of the room. His knees were shaking. He hated having to stand in front of the class. It was as if Mrs. Jules had brought him in for show and tell. He felt like he was some kind of weirdo. He just wanted to sit at a desk and be like everyone else. But worst of all, his name wasn't Mark Miller. It was Benjamin Nushmut. And he had moved from Hamilton, not Macedonia. But he was too scared to mention that to Mrs. Jules. He was afraid to correct a teacher. Why don't you tell the class a little bit about yourself, Mark? Suggested Mrs. Jules. Benjamin didn't know what to say. He wished that he really was Mark Miller. Mark Miller wouldn't be scared, he thought. He'd probably have lots to say. Everyone would like him. No one would think that Miller was weird. Well, I guess we just better find you a place to sit, said Mrs. Jules. She put him in an empty desk between Todd and BB. Hi, Mark, said Todd. I'm Todd. You'll like Mrs. Jules. She's the nicest teacher in the school. Todd, no talking, said Mrs. Jules. Go write your name on the blackboard under the word discipline. Hi, Mark, said BB. I'm BB Gunn. Hi, Benjamin said quietly. He decided he'd have to tell Mrs. Jules his real name at recess. Oh, he cringed. He didn't know why, but for some reason he had trouble saying his own name. And what's your name, little boy? An adult would ask him. Benjamin Nushmut, he'd answer. What? Benjamin Nushmut. What? Ben Ja Min Nush Mutt. What? Benjamin Nush Mutt. What? Benjamin Nushmut. Oh, nice to meet you, Benjamin. He never knew what it was like to be a person. What made a person suddenly understand? When the bell rang for recess, everyone charged out of the room. Benjamin slowly walked up to Mrs. Jules' desk. Somehow he had to tell her. Mrs. Jules was sorting paper. Oh, hello, Mark, she said. How are you enjoying the class so far? Fine, said Benjamin. Good, I'm glad to hear that, said Mrs. Jules. Benjamin shrugged and then walked out the room. If I had told her my name, she would have thought I was weird for not telling her sooner, he realized. He stood at the top of the stairs and looked down. Recess was only 10 minutes long, and it seemed not worth it to go all the way down and then come all the way back up. And he didn't have any friends down there anyway. He had never been more unhappy in his whole life. He sat on the top step. Mark Miller, he said out loud. It was an easy name to say. Mark Miller probably would have made lots of friends by now, he thought. Suddenly, he heard a low rumble. When the stairs began to shake, and it felt like there was an earthquake, this whole stupid school is going to fall over, he thought. He put his head between his knees. The rumble got worse. I'm gonna die and no one will even know who I am," he worried. The new kid, Mark Miller, the weirdo. But it wasn't an earthquake. It was just all the kids running back up the stairs. "Hi, Mark." Why are you sitting that way?" asked Dee Dee. You look funny," said Ron. Benjamin looked up. "How come you weren't at recess?" asked Jason. "We were looking everywhere for you." Couldn't find you on the playground," asked Calvin. "Hey, it's just straight down. You can't miss it." "But don't go into the basement," Sherry warned. "Whatever you do, don't go in the basement." "We'll go down together at lunch," said Todd, "and that way you won't get lost." Benjamin smiled. He was glad everyone seemed to like him. Well, at least they liked Mark Miller. He wondered if they would like Benjamin Nushmut also. "The bell has rung," said Mrs. Jules, standing in the doorway. "Now, everyone, get inside." She made Todd put a check next to his name on the blackboard for being late. Mrs. Jules handed a stack of worksheets to Damien and asked him to pass them out to the rest of the class. Benjamin looked at his worksheet, and at the top right corner, there was a place to put your name. He didn't know what to put there. Mark Miller or Benjamin Nushmut? He left it blank and started working on the first problem. Louis, the yard teacher, entered the room carrying a white paper sack. "Benjamin forgot his lunch," he said. His mother brought it to him. "Who?" said Mrs. Schultz. "Benjamin," said Louis. "There's no Benjamin in this class," said Mrs. Schultz. "Are you sure? It looks like it's a good lunch." "I know the names of my children in my class," she said indignantly. "Well, just leave it here until I figure this out," said Louis. He left the lunch on Mrs. Schultz's desk and walked out the room. Benjamin frowned. He looked at the white paper sack on Mrs. Schultz's desk. He couldn't tell Mrs. Schultz his real name now. She'd think he was making it up to get a free lunch. He wrote Mark Miller at the top of his worksheet. But one of these days, he knew he'd have to tell her his real name.